this time, we're going to turn to opening statements. Mr. Palal, are you ready to give your opening statement at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Good morning. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur came to Las Vegas to attend a Mike Tyson fight. After the fight, Tupac, along with Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and other people that were with that group, ran into a person named Orlando Anderson. And Orlando Anderson is the defendant's nephew. And when they encountered Orlando Anderson sitting by himself, they attacked him. That attack was captured on video. Then, a few hours later, Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight drive down Flamingo Road to Club 662, where Tupac is scheduled to perform a concert. Then 2.5 hours later, after Tupac and Suge engaged in the beating of Orlando Anderson, they are gunned down. Tupac is gunned down in a drive-by shooting from a white Cadillac in an act of revenge. During those 2.5 hours, you will learn that the defendant was escalating and planning the retribution for the beating of his beloved nephew. Now, let's be clear. Dwayne Davis did not pull the trigger. But what he did do was plan the retaliation for the beating of his nephew. You will learn that Dwayne Davis got the gun. You will learn that he got into a white Cadillac. You will learn when the opportunity presented itself for retribution, Dwayne Davis made sure that the shooters were armed and ready to execute their revenge. And remarkably, you will learn that from Dwayne Davis himself. But to understand what happened on September 7th, 1996, on the streets of Las Vegas, we need to go about 275 miles west to the city of Compton, California. What you'll learn is that Compton is about 10 square miles. But in the mid-1990s, those 10 square miles were occupied by over 30 gangs claiming its territory. And important to this case, there are two gangs, Mob Piru and the Southside Compton groups. Let's talk a little bit about the Mob Piru. The Mob Piru is a group that associated with the color red. And you'll hear that Suge Knight, the person who was driving Tupac Shakur that night, grew up in the neighborhood of Mob Piru. But by the mid-1990s, he had become a very successful CEO of the record label Death Row Records. But despite, or maybe because of where he came from, you'll hear that Suge Knight continued to employ Mob Piru gang members as part of Death Row. They would act as unofficial security, and other times they would engage in, let's call them other acts, on behalf of Suge Knight. But Death Row in the mid-1990s was one of the most successful record labels around. They had artists such as Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, and of course, Tupac Shakur. And in 1996, Tupac Shakur was maybe the largest and biggest, most successful rapper around. He had just sold, released All Eyes on Me, a double album that was met with huge success. Additionally, Tupac Shakur was a movie star, having appeared in a number of movies in critically acclaimed roles. He has, at times, been referred to as an icon. But for the purposes of this case, what you need to know is that Tupac Shakur was not a gangster. He was a hip-hop artist associated with the Mob Piru. Now, the other gang that's important to note here is the Southside Compton Crips. And when it comes to Southside, Dwayne Keefe D. Davis was the leader of the Burris Street faction of the Southside Compton Crips. And while Suge Knight rose to prominence in his neighborhood due to the money that he was bringing in through the music industry, Dwayne Davis rose to prominence in his neighborhood because he was a very successful, large-scale drug trafficker. And you will learn that that is how one moves up in the world of gangs, by bringing in money to the neighborhood. The other thing you'll learn is that Orlando Baby Lane Anderson was his nephew, and also a highly respected member of the Southside Compton Crips. Now, as part of this case, you're going to hear another name. Eric Zip Martin. Now, Eric Zip Martin is not a member of the Southside Compton Crips. In fact, he's based out of New York. He's involved in the drug trade and knows Dwayne Davis as a result of both their involvements in the drug trade. Dwayne Davis from the West Coast, Eric Zip Martin from the East Coast. And one of the connections that Dwayne Davis gets through his association with Zip Martin is with Sean Puffy Combs, who was then the CEO of Bad Boy Entertainment. Sean Combs wanted some security when he came out to the West Coast. He was worried about Mob Piru. He was worried about the members of Death Row Records. And so Dwayne Keefe D. Davis agreed to be around to act as unofficial security for Sean Combs and his artists when they came out west, in order specifically to ensure there are no problems with Mob Piru and Death Row Records. And this took a rivalry between Mob Piru and Southside Compton Crips and escalated it. And those tensions boiled over in the Lakewood Mall in the summer of 1996. There, you'll hear that Trayvon Lane, a member of the Mob Piru, associated with Death Row Records, was there with other members of Mob Piru in order to do some shopping. Lakewood Mall was a mall nearby Compton. You'll also hear that Baby Lane Anderson, Orlando Anderson, the defendant's nephew, was there. Now, Trayvon Lane that day was wearing a chain with a Death Row medallion. And there was a fight that occurs between the Mob Piru group and the Southside Compton Crips. And at one point, that chain is pulled off Trayvon Lane's neck. Now, what happened to that chain is an issue of much dispute. Not everybody agrees with it. But the act of disrespect of pulling the Death Row chain and the brawl that occurs further escalates this heated rivalry. And what you'll learn is that these two men, Trayvon Lane and Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, they encounter each other again. This time in Las Vegas. So that brings us back up to September 7th, 1996, here in Las Vegas. Again, Mike Tyson is fighting Bruce Seldon. He disposes of him in less than in a round. Doesn't take a full round. And then after the fight, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and the people that are here with, they leave. And among his group is Trayvon Lane. And that is why this fight occurs. Trayvon Lane and the Death Row group sees Orlando Anderson standing by himself, and they decide to attack him in retribution for what happened at the Lakewood Mall. You'll see Orlando Anderson's on the bottom of that group. You see security coming, trying to break this up. And then you'll see Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and that group exit the MGM Grand. Now, Orlando Anderson was by himself because when Dwayne Davis purchased the tickets for the Bruce Seldon fight, he got them through a scalper. So everybody that came with Dwayne Davis were seated separately throughout the fight. And so Orlando Anderson was, at that time, by himself. You'll see that Mr. Shakur, Mr. Knight, and his group leave the MGM Grand. And you'll see that Orlando Anderson, after being held by security, is questioned for a bit, asked if he wants to press charges. He decides he doesn't want to participate in any type of prosecution and that he doesn't need medical attention. Dwayne Davis hears about this beating. And what you will hear is that in his world, there is no question that a response is required. And you will hear from Dwayne Davis what happens next. Because what happened over the next 2.5 hours is something Dwayne Davis would later describe himself in a secret 2008 interview from his attorney's office with the federal task force. And we'll talk about that interview and the circumstances surrounding that later. But we'll hear about what the next 2.5 hours was. So, what we learn is that Dwayne Davis is upset about the beating of his nephew. And frankly, that's not an unusual response. What's unusual is the next steps Dwayne Davis takes. Unusual for the normal person, maybe not unusual for in gang culture. Dwayne Davis decides he is going to organize a retaliation, that this beating cannot go unanswered. Then he runs into a person named Zip Martin. Remember the Zip Martin that was the connection with Bad Boy Entertainment from New York? And Zip Martin tells him that he has a gun and that he can come help him out.
Okay, where do you go to? What do you tell Zip right then? You tell Zip, hey, we're going to go handle this shit or whatever?
Yeah, like, y'all want us to come? I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? That they was telling that they going to get 662 club.
Who said that?
Everybody.
Everybody up there?
Yeah, everybody. You want to come to
Well,
that?
how do you know that Zip's got a gun? Does he tell
It
you?
was in the lobby, in the lobby. I got one.
Do you ask him? Do you have one? Or he just tells you, yeah, I got one?
Yeah, that's when they asked me, do we need some help? I said, yeah, you do. I'm like, yeah, okay, cool.
I don't know what he gave you.
Yeah.
So later, Dwayne Davis organizes 2 vehicles to go over to the 662 Club. Before that, he gets the gun from Zip Martin. He goes out to his Mercedes-Benz, gets the gun from Zip Martin, and then after some time, he assembles 2 cars to go to 662 to violently confront Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight for the beating of his nephew. And you'll hear that Dwayne Davis wasn't initially in the white Cadillac. He goes into a van, and Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, they go in a white Cadillac, and they go to Club 662, waiting for Tupac Shakur, waiting for Suge Knight, waiting for this violent confrontation. And what you'll learn is that Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight don't show up while they're there.
We went up to 626 club. They didn't show up. We waited about 15, 20 minutes. They didn't show up. So it's like, let's go get some liquor. We stopped at the liquor store. I got out the van there and jumped in the Cadillac.
So what you hear Dwayne Davis say is he got out of the van and goes into the Cadillac. And the plan at that point is to go to a liquor store, get some booze, and then go back to the Las Vegas Strip and party. What the original intention was before Orlando Anderson was beaten at the MGM Grand. But on the way back to the Las Vegas Strip, they see a caravan of cars. And that caravan included Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. And in that white Cadillac, before the shooting occurs, Dwayne Davis explains that the driver is Terrence T. Brown. In the rear driver's side is DeAndre Dre, or Big Dre Smith. In the rear passenger side is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And Dwayne Davis himself, KBD, is in the front passenger side. And this is how Dwayne Davis explains the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Yeah. These little liquor stores right there that we came up on Harlem at the Las Vegas Boulevard. And shit, Here he come in that BMW, like, here you go. And brawls, Tupac, Tupac. I was like, there you go. Made the U-turn. We wasn't supposed to make it. Just wanted the U-turn. They was in a little lane. And we just pulled up on the side and checked every car to see where they was.
So what directed your attention to him was some girl shouting at Tupac?
Tupac, he gave himself away. Otherwise, they would have gone away. He already done what you want to do. They was he gone.
You did a U-turn, so then you pull alongside of it. You guys were in the car. Have you already handed him the gun at this point, or at what point do you hand him the gun?
I thought he was going to pull on my side. You know, that's going to go next, going to look out for him. You know, and he pulled on his side.
So you were fitting to blast if you had to, or you were just...
Yeah, if we would have been on my side, I would have blast.
Okay. So you hand the gun to the back seat.
Yeah.
You can hear Lane.
I gave it to Dre. Dre was like, no. And Lane's like, dude, fuck, dude.
So what you hear Dwayne Davis say, admit, that as they see Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight driving to Club 662, Dwayne Davis, along with Terrence Brown, DeAndre Smith, and Orlando Anderson, decide to make a U-turn, confront Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Dwayne Davis has the firearm. It's a firearm he got from Eric Von Zit Martin, and then he passes it to the back. Dwayne Davis says that if they were on his side, if Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were on his side of the vehicle, he would have shot them himself. But because they were on the other side, he handed it to DeAndre Smith. DeAndre Smith, according to Dwayne Davis, did not want to shoot at that time, so Orlando Anderson shot into that car. Dwayne Davis explains this over and over again.
Literally, on the street.
Okay, Lane starts blasting. You say Suge looks over, he sees you. He looks right at you.
Exactly.
Are you looking at this?
I just know he does something to say, you know.
When he looks over at you, and then, Tupac's busy getting shot. Evidently, the story is Tupac's trying to either get out
In the
of
back seat or something.
Yeah, what do you see happening inside
And
that
jump
car?
in. I seen the bullet going through again. I thought he was dead. He must have scraped him or something in the head or something.
A piece of glass went into his neck right here.
And he had the thing in the head.
Great.
I thought he was dead.
Okay.
So, I'm sorry, did you guys stop the two girls? Did Polo stop the car and let them get off?
Yeah. And we made the right.
Okay, but he stopped what you said, why you cool and let off?
Yeah. And we made the right and so for all the sea-breed and homeless. Stupid bitches. And we shot their window around and they stopped.
So Tupac's trying to jump in the back seat. And what should do? Just tuck him?
So, he couldn't really hook up, he was too big, you know. Yeah.
One of the things Dwayne Davis talks about during the murder of Tupac Shakur is that there's a car full of women. I think he calls them broads at one point. A car full of women who are there as well. And you're going to hear from one of those women. And what she's going to tell you is that she disagrees slightly with Mr. Davis's rendition of facts. They were, in fact, communicating with Suge and Tupac's car, but they weren't talking to Tupac, they were talking to Suge. And what she says is she hears gunshots, she sees the white Cadillac flee, and then what Dwayne Davis interprets as them chasing her, she'll tell you is them just panicking and trying to get away. But she will say they inadvertently follow Dwayne Davis and the other people in the white car as they are fleeing. After Suge Knight and Tupac Shakur's vehicle is shot, Suge Knight makes a U-turn and heads back to the Las Vegas Strip. The car ultimately can go no further and stops. Police arrive, medical arrives, and you will hear that Suge Knight was grazed in the head and had some glass going in his neck. He ultimately survives those injuries and is released fairly quickly. You'll also hear that Tupac Shakur was shot multiple times, that he was brought to UMC, and that 6 days later, he succumbed to those injuries. And within 24 hours, the Cadillac and the assailants are back in Compton. They stay the night, and they drive right home as though nothing happened. But a war followed them back to Compton. Because while people were afraid to come forward to police, the police knew and the streets knew that Southside Compton Crips were responsible for this murder. And the war that follows at Compton is a bloody one. You'll hear that Mob Piru and Southside Crip members start shooting at each other. Within 10 days, 3 people are killed. A number of people are shot, including an 11-year-old girl. And what you'll also learn is that none of those cases were prosecuted. Why? Because in this context, in the gang context of this, the combination of gangs and guns is scary. And in this world, silence means survival. The one person who has a hard time being silent is Dwayne Davis. You're going to hear from 1998 to 2023, Dwayne Davis has given a number of statements regarding this case. So, as early as 1998, Davis spoke to the FBI. He admitted he was in Las Vegas during Tupac's murder, but he denies being responsible. Then in 1999, Davis speaks to the FBI again. And these aren't interviews that are focused on the Tupac Shakur murder. These are interviews regarding drug transactions and drug trafficking. But he does say that Tupac does come up, and Dwayne Davis admits to being in Las Vegas for Tupac Shakur's murder. Says he wasn't involved, but he was mad about the fact that Orlando Anderson was beaten, and that his plan was to handle it in Compton had Tupac survived. Then in 2008, the interview of clips we've heard today, in a secret interview with the federal task force, Davis admits to his role in the murder of Tupac Shakur. And we do need to talk a little bit about this 2008 federal task force. Because what this task force is investigating is not the murder of Tupac Shakur. What this task force is investigating is another rapper's murder. A rapper by the name of Christopher Wallace. Somebody who is known as Biggie Smalls, so the notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace got murdered 6 months after Tupac Shakur was killed. And there was some allegation that the LAPD might have been involved. So a federal task force was formed to determine what happened to Christopher Wallace. And the interesting thing about the murder of Christopher Wallace is that Christopher Wallace is killed leaving a party in LA. Also at that party, Dwayne Davis. Christopher Wallace there was a suspect vehicle that involved a Chevy SS Impala, and Dwayne Davis happened to own a Chevy SS Impala. Now, as a result of that, the task force decides, well, let's look at Dwayne Davis. And the thing we know about Dwayne Davis is that he trafficked narcotics. And so they were able, through a CI and an undercover, to have a drug transaction with Dwayne Davis. And as a result, Dwayne Davis now has a case, a big trafficking case. And so the federal task force approaches Dwayne Davis and his attorney, and they say, hey, look, we want information regarding the murder of Christopher Wallace. That is what we are trying to investigate. And what Dwayne Davis says is, I don't have any information about that thing, but I can tell you about what we did. I can tell you about Tupac. And that's what he does. He tells a federal task force that that's about his involvement, what you've heard, his orchestration of the murder of Tupac Shakur. That secret conversation, that proffer, was secretly reported and released later. In 2009, Davis is being so helpful to federal authorities that he actually flies out to New York to try and get Zip Martin to implicate himself in the Tupac Shakur murder. Zip Martin at that time was dying of cancer, was out of the game, and really did not engage with Duane Davis. In 2009, though, Duane Davis gives an interview to Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department Detective Dan Long. Now, Duane Davis is more guarded in that interview. It is a different setting than the interview of 2008. It's not a secret proffer agreement. But Duane Davis does admit a number of things. That he was in Las Vegas, that he was mad about Orlando Anderson getting beat, that he was the boss, that he was in the white Cadillac, and that he procured the firearm that ultimately killed Tupac Shakur. Then, in 2011, the landscape changes. Because in 2011, Greg Kading, the guy who was leading the task force in 2008, the guy who organized the secret proffer between Duane Davis and the federal task force, he leaves law enforcement and decides he's going to publish a book about his investigation into Biggie Smalls, the guy who was killed 6 months after Tupac, and Tupac Shakur. And what he puts in the book is that Duane Davis confessed to the murder of Tupac Shakur. The book tells the story about Davis' admission, about himself, but it also tells the story of Duane Davis telling about his nephew's involvement in the murder, about Big Dre's involvement in the murder, about Terrence Brown's involvement in the murder. And this is a problem for Duane Davis, because that meeting was supposed to be secret. And now his cooperation with federal authorities is open to the world. Not only that, Greg Kading is now profiting off Duane Davis's life story. So, in 2017, Duane Davis decides to go public. He's approached by the producers of a show called Death Row Chronicles that appears on BET. And this is just a small portion of what he says is his motivation for appearing.
When I went in TV these days, I was a popping, king-created drug dealer. I'm the only one alive that really can tell you the story about the Tupac Shakur. People have been pursuing me for 20 years. Newspapers, magazines. I'm coming out now to tell the story because I got cancer. I got nothing else to lose. All I care about now is the truth.
Duane Davis says, all I want to do now is tell the truth. And in the 2017 public interview, he's a little evasive, but he admits to being the boss. He admits to being in the white Cadillac. And he admits to be part of the murder of Tupac Shakur. And when he says he's the only person that can tell what happened, he's right. Because by 2017, Terrence Brown is deceased. DeAndre Smith is deceased. Orlando Baby Lane Anderson is deceased. Terrence Brown was murdered in an unrelated incident. Orlando Anderson was murdered in an unrelated incident. And DeAndre Smith died from health issues. Remarkably, in 2019, Duane Davis then decides he's going to publish his own book. And with regards to the book, it is certainly a lot of self-aggrandizement. But again, the core remains. He was mad about the beating of Orlando Anderson, his nephew. He was in Las Vegas. He got the gun. He was in the white Cadillac, and he handed the gun to the sheriff. And what you'll notice is a constant thing that always goes through these statements is Duane Davis's visceral anger at Tupac Shakur for putting hands on his nephew. In the book, he says, them jumping on my nephew gave us the ultimate green light to do something to their ass. Then, Duane Davis decides that he's going to do public interviews regarding his role in the murder of Tupac Shakur.
So you ended up getting in the car with Baby Lane and them?
Yeah, we running it in. Went to the light on Sunset and Flamingo. And dude, we acted like he was in a parade or something. That nigga in that BMW hanging out the window. Hey, this Tupac, it's Tupac. And them bitches, shit, they was hollering for him. And we had heard that motherfucker. They came up on the side of him.
Davis's public admissions mirror his private life. He admits to being a leader of Southside Crips. He admits to the significance of the fight over the death row chain at the Lakewood Mall. He admits to being in Las Vegas the night of the fight. He admits to being angry that Tupac stomped Orlando Anderson at the MGM. He admits that he was hunting down Tupac and Suge, first going to 662. He admits that he got a Glock 40 from Eric Zip Martin for the purposes of hunting Tupac. He admits that he was in a white Cadillac with his gang members looking for Tupac. He admits to seeing Tupac in a black BMW and then changing directions, making that U-turn to confront Tupac and Suge. He admits to putting the gun he obtained that night in the back seat of the vehicle so the shooters could shoot. And again, what remains, even as late as 2020, 2021, 22, is Dwayne Davis's visceral anger at Tupac Shakur.
He didn't, my nephew never jumped on no fucking Tupac. Come on, man. Tupac was wrong with two fucking shoes. I mean, don't you think he was wrong? Honestly.
I mean, yeah, I think he could have, reacted in a better way.
Listen, you don't think that man is wrong?
He could have reacted in a better way, I guess.
I'm talking, Vlad is his fucking biggest fan. He admitted that man is wrong, man.
He was wrong, man, but that was only done out of loyalty, man.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. He never jumped, my nephew didn't jump on him. He jumped on my nephew with a kid, man. My nephew was a fucking kid. He was a grown-ass man, dude. You know what I'm saying? He was a fucking kid, dude. That's why he had on the channel. He's a fucking kid, dude. You know what I'm saying? He was wrong. My nephew never jumped on him. He jumped on my nephew. My nephew didn't throw a punch, man. Shit was wrong, dude. Jumped on the fucking kid, dude.
And this anger is not just demonstrated publicly, but you will hear as recently as 2024, privately, in a conversation with his son, he talks about his feelings about Tupac Shakur, nearly 30 years after the murder.
What I do is I'll way out there for him, dude. So you stop the and put them on. Oh, you know. No, that.
That is the visceral anger that Dwayne Davis had for Tupac Shakur. It did it in 2.5 hours. He took care of what he thought was the proper response. And 28 years later, he still is angry about what Tupac did. On September 7th, 1996, Tupac Shakur publicly, on camera, participated in a humiliating beating of Dwayne Davis's nephew, Orlando Anderson. Dwayne Davis knew that in his world, that required a response. And over the years, in private interviews, in public statements, and even in private calls, Dwayne Davis has repeatedly told us, over and over again, about the anger he felt and his own role in the revenge drive-by shooting of Tupac Shakur. And now, nearly 30 years later, we're going to ask you to finally hold Dwayne Davis accountable. Thank you.